On today's show, Cavs center Jarrett Allen had an all-star caliber season last year. If the Cavs want to reach their ceiling this season, he needs to do it again. We'll tell you why on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a bit of a big announcement coming later this week with Cavs coverage for me in particular. But want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave a nice review as well. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed. If you're watching this video right now, click that thumbs up button for me and hit the notification bell so you are alerted anytime the latest Locked On Cavs content goes live. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, and you can start the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show, talking a lot of Jarrett Allen, talking about what he needs to do to reach his potential this season, a little bit about last season. The guy I wanted to bring in to do this is the site editor at Fear the Sword, Jackson Flickinger. Jackson, thanks for doing this. Want to go with the Jarrett Allen talk here, because I thought last year, and in looking back, I know he wasn't named an all-star. I know there was a lot of consideration for him to be an all-star, but I actually thought last year was the most consistent and was the best year of his career, which was significant coming off of what was just a disaster of a playoff series against the Knicks a couple of years ago. I do think that there's no reason why he can't come back at the same level, if not a little bit higher this year.
I definitely agree with that statement. I think we really saw Jarrett Allen shine, especially in that run from December through February, where he was the only big on the floor. He benefited from having some more spacing, and he really had some good chemistry with Donovan Mitchell during that stretch, and I think that really helped his offensive game, and I think it helped his defensive game as well, with some of the more having like a bigger backcourt. I think that just it all just worked together for Jarrett Allen to show what he does best, because he does have really good, what I would call traditional center skills, and those skills were highlighted when he was really the only traditional center on the court.
Right, he does. He absolutely strikes me as the traditional center. And I would like to, he's never going to be Brook Lopez. I think we're going to see that range expand a little bit this year with Kenny Atkinson in charge in Cleveland. I think that's an interesting place to go next to, because obviously those two have history, where Kenny Atkinson was Jarrett Allen's head coach in Brooklyn at the start of his career. So I do think that's a big reason why. And, we should bring up Jarrett Allen signed an extension earlier this summer. He's going to be in Cleveland. He's not eligible to be traded, even though there were a lot of, I think he was a hot name that was thrown in trade rumors earlier this summer, but he signed that extension. I think August 2nd was the date. So he's not eligible to be traded until February 2nd, which I do think is something that's worth bringing up when you talk about him. Like, if this doesn't work, the Cavs do, I think, have a bit of an off ramp that they can take, if you will. But I expect him to have a really good year. And I think that him having a good year with those traditional center skills that you bring up, it does bring me to question, do we think that him and Evan Mobley can get the most out of each other? Like, can that version of Jarrett Allen that was there from, December 15th, I think is when that press release went out that both Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were going to miss the next 4 to 6 weeks, and it ended up, I think, being 6 weeks almost exactly for both of them. That's when that stretch started, and he was awesome. That's why he was almost an all-star, because of how good he was. But can that type of thing, and I think this is a big key to see just if the Cavs can really reach their ceiling, can that type of play be replicated when they're both healthy?
I think that's an open question still. One of the things that, Jarrett Allen benefited so much from those dribble handoffs in that stretch where there wasn't a big waiting for him in the restricted area, and his guy had to go to the level of him. He's a really good screener, which opened up either the shot for someone like Mitchell if the big sagged down, or if the big got to the level, Jarrett Allen's good enough to, roll, make the right pass, finish at the rim. All of those things You can't do that when Evan Mobley's out there, and I think that's kind of the problem. At least you couldn't do that with Evan Mobley out there under the previous system that they were running. And that's where I think it's going to come down to Kenny Atkinson, because you talked about Jarrett Allen expanding his range. I know the free throw numbers are pretty good, so you kind of think maybe he could. But I sort of think Jarrett Allen is who Jarrett Allen is. I don't know how much Evan Mobley, like I know everyone likes to think that he's going to become a great three-point shooter. I don't know how likely that is. So I think it's on Kenny Atkinson to really make that work. Like, can they get the guards moving off ball? Can they set screens off ball? Can they have a motion offense that's really, reading triggers, reacting, things like that? Where I think that if you do have the right offensive system, I think that it can work. The question is, can you get that offensive system up and running? And this is where I kind of have, we talk about Evan Mobley. I think a lot of this comes down to how Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell adjusted this new offense, because one of the things that has always frustrated me about both of them when they're on the floor together is the lack of movement that both of them have in half-court sets when they don't have the ball. So if you're going to make two bigs work, they have to be moving off ball pretty consistently. Your bigs need to be setting screens for them. That way you have multiple things happening at once and you can create that space.
So I do think for the two big thing to work, and I think that's a good point you bring up about the backcourt needing to operate a little bit differently than it has in the past. I don't know how. I'm very curious to see how likely that is to happen, because both those guys, and Donovan in particular, like, he's had a massively successful career doing what he does, and he's incredible. Mm-hmm. He is a guy that, in his good years is going to be an MVP candidate. In his bad years, he's a perennial all-star. Like, that's who Donovan Mitchell is. So I don't know how likely that is to change. But I almost wonder is, and I think a lot of people believe the key to making Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley work together is actually Evan Mobley expanding his offensive game. And you said, becoming a great three-point shooter. I don't think that's in the cards for him. But what I do think could be in the cards for him is a higher volume three-point shooter. And if that's the case, like, he doesn't need to go out there and shoot 43%. I think that's an insane thought. But can he shoot 35, 36% on 4 3-pointers a game? Like, if he does, how does that change the way things look for Jarrett Allen? Does that allow Jarrett to kind of find more success there with maybe some added space?
I don't see, the thing is, like, I don't think that would do anything if Evan Mobley's the second big on the court, because you would still give up that shot as opposed to, like, leaving the paint and giving up, looks at the rim for guys like Mitchell and Allen. I mean, this is a team that does their best offense at the rim. So I think you're always going to try to take that away, like, no matter what, So I think it would be good, but I don't think he's, like, I don't think that would get covered, So
the other thing that I do think can create space is if he does that. And I have been, for the most part, pretty impressed really with the playmaking from both of these guys. One of the things that I think disappeared, maybe not disappeared, but went down in frequency, was the big passing that we saw so frequently early in Evan's career. That was just like such a highlight for this Cavs team. But I do think Evan is a good playmaker, and I think putting him in those spots to where he can be, in position to make plays for others, in combination with being a higher volume shooter from outside, like, that could be a way to make this happen too.
Yeah, I mean, like, Evan becoming a better three-point shooter is obviously going to help. I just think that the bar is a lot higher than what I think a lot of people think it is. Just based off of, you would always rather give up a corner three to a 36% three-point shooter than you would, like, give up something in the paint to somebody like Allen or Mitchell who just feast there. And so that's kind of like back to, like, the Isaac Okoro conversation, where it's like, it doesn't matter if he's shooting like 38%. Like, teams are completely fine with that if it means that they can put extra help on, like, the bigs. So that's where I'm a little more concerned. I mean, like, even Dean Wade was over a 40% three-point shooter. His volume was low, but, were teams really closing out hard to him where they, it was better, but, like, you are always going to lean more towards protecting the paint against this Cavs team.
Right. And I think that's really the case in a lot of NBA cases.
Right.
There's nothing easier. There's no more, we talk about the efficiency of a corner three, but the thing that is always going to be the most efficient shot in basketball is a layup or a dunk. There's never going to be anything that's more efficient than that. I do want to talk about the chemistry that Jarrett Allen has with Donovan Mitchell in particular. We know those two went on a terrific run together last December and January. Is pairing them the right option for the Cavs? We're going to talk about that next right here in Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks also is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you can watch the winnings roll in. For instance, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. I know Caleb Williams maybe hasn't gotten off to the best start. I don't believe he's won a game yet. Maybe some people in that city are panicking about it, but I feel pretty confident Caleb Williams is going to have at least one passing yard in every game he plays in. That sounds like an easy win to me. Plus, you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. I just mentioned efficiency. That is the most efficient way you can do things. 100 times your money on 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the place you can do that. Prize Picks is the place to go. The other thing about Prize Picks that you need to know is that it is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, your Prize Picks picks are still live. So, download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's show also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the place to go when you're searching out tickets. The Cleveland Guardians are going to be hosting in Game 1 of the ALDS. You're going to want to be at Game 1 of the ALDS. Why? Because playoff baseball is awesome. I don't know who they're going to be playing yet. Could be the Tigers, could be the Royals, could be the Astros, could be a number of different teams. But I know that game going to be at Progressive Field. I know you're going to want to be there. I want to be there. You're going to want to be there. The way to get there, Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Very important. Wanted to get that in now before I tell you more good things about Game Time, like the fact that you can toggle on the all-in pricing feature, so you'll know exactly how much you are paying for your seat before you get to the end, right? I don't want to be bombarded with taxes and fees at the final stage of buying a ticket. Why would you want that? Game Time allows you to take that equation out of the way. You just toggle in the all-in pricing and boom, you're good to go. The other thing Game Time does that I love, they will show you exactly what it looks like from your seat. Whether you're going to a baseball game, a basketball game, football game, concert, you can see the stage, the field, the court, whatever it is. Game Time will show you what your view is going to look like. So you get there, it's like, yeah, this is exactly what I saw on the Game Time app. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, the Game Time app, create an account, code LOCKEDONNBA, $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's Game Time. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can get the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Leave us a 5-star rating. Say some nice words in a review as well. Like we've been saying some nice words about Jarrett Allen. I think Jarrett Allen deserves to have nice words said about him. And Jackson, the time he took off last year, we talked about the Evan Mobley injury. We talked about the Darius Garland injury. That brought really Jarrett Allen and Donovan Mitchell together. And I think that pairing I think Jarrett is the best big to play with Donovan, and I think Donovan is the best small to play with Jarrett. And I think part of it is because, and the one thing that, we've talked a ton about Evan Mobley and his offensive ceiling. But like watching Jarrett Allen set screens for Donovan Mitchell, just it feels to me like the offense runs so much smoother when that's been the case for them.
Yeah, I mean, like Jarrett Allen is a fundamentally good screen setter. Evan Mobley is not, at least not yet. Hopefully that changes, but like that pairing was phenomenal last year. They outscored opponents by 7.6 points per 100 possessions when they were both on the floor. For perspective, that's an 86th percentile. And that is taking into account the starting lineup, which was pretty mediocre. So whenever they were on the floor and it was just one guard and one center, it just really worked well. And I do think that predictability that you have with Allen, with his screen setting, with his rolling to the rim, just one of the things that I think really came through last year is that there was a lot of emphasis on Donovan Mitchell's playmaking after that series against the Knicks. I think there is still room for Donovan to grow as a playmaker, but when you simplify things and you make his reads really easy, I think you can see him be a really good playmaker. And I feel like with the predictability of Jarrett Allen with his screens and dribble handoff, with additional spacing on the floor, it just makes all of that so much easier. And I think that's why that pairing really worked. Because if you look at the numbers, like Mitchell and Mobley together, when Mobley's the only big out there, those lineups didn't work. And I think that does kind of come down to the predictability aspect that Jarrett Allen gives you.
Right. I think it's a comfortability factor. And listen, Jarrett Allen is not Rudy Gobert. Like, there are things he does better than Rudy Gobert. There are things that he does worse than Rudy Gobert. But I think he's a fairly similar player to Rudy Gobert, especially when you're comparing him against Evan Mobley. And why do I bring Rudy Gobert up? Well, that's because that's who Donovan Mitchell spent so much time about. It makes sense to me. It's easy to see why those two would work well. And you bring up the predictability factor. Like, Jarrett Allen, I also think, is a pretty low maintenance player on offense. Like, he doesn't need to have the ball in his hands to be successful. He's somebody that he's fine setting screens and going to the basket. And when he's got space too, I just think he's that much better.
Yeah, I think we really saw him grow in those little pocket passes that Mitchell would throw when he catches it at like the free throw line. He was really comfortable with that shot. And I guess if you were talking about him expanding his range, if you think that, I think it's because of he was really comfortable and looked really good with that type of shot. And I think that's where Allen does a really good job of just taking what the defense gives him and just accepting it and not trying to force things too much. He's never playing outside of himself. And that predictability is really useful when you are, in the situations where he was with Donovan, he's the second option, but in the situations where he's with Garland and Mobley, he's sometimes the third or fourth option. And I think being somebody who's comfortable just being what they are is an underrated thing, and one of the reasons why Jarrett Allen is as impactful as he is.
So one of the last things I want to ask about Jarrett Allen is, do you expect him to shoot three-pointers this year? And he's never going to become a high-volume three-point shooter. He's not going to be Brook Lopez. But I just think it's worth noting that in 80 games in Brooklyn, his second year, the head coach, none other than Kenny Atkinson, Jarrett Allen took over a half three per game, 0.6 threes per game. How many threes are we going to see from Jarrett Allen this year?
I don't think we're going to see a lot. At least I feel like maybe, but it's going to be one of those things where I'm going to have to see it before I actually believe it, and not even seeing it just in like preseason, but seeing it in like actual NBA regular season games before I believe it. The same with, like, I remember JB was talking about, Evan Mobley's going to take 5 threes a game or something like that after the All-Star break, and it was like, cool, I'm going to believe it when I see it. So
it's 5 threes a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good week, but
it depends how many games they play.
Yeah. So, I'll believe it when I see it. I do think he has really good touch. I don't know if he has the confidence in his shot, though. So that's where, I don't know. We'll see. And one of the things is that usually big like Allen, you would think he's probably going to be taking him, if we're talking about like the Lopez comparison, a lot of above the break threes, and that's kind of a spot where the Cavs have traditionally liked to keep Garland and Mitchell stationed. So we'll see just kind of how the offense works, but it would be really helpful. Like those dribble handoffs would be a lot better if he could just keep it and just pull it.
Right. Yeah. I'd be very surprised if he becomes like a Brook Lopez type. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'd be surprised if that kind of transformation. But hey, I mean, like stranger things have happened, and it's worth noting. Brook Lopez did that under Kenny Atkinson. Al Horford became a 3-point shooter when Kenny Atkinson was in Atlanta. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if there's a reason to believe it can, I think that's the reason.
One of the things that I will say is that I think Brook Lopez is like an uncomparable person because like he is one of one in the sense of like halfway through his career he decided I'm just going to be a really good 3-point shooter. That just doesn't happen. It's like when people pull stats like, well, when Jimmy Butler was a rookie, he had the same number as this rookie who's not very good. So maybe this rookie who's not very good can become Jimmy Butler, and it's like, well, Jimmy Butler's like one of one. So
probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
So one more guy I want to talk about today, because you have some takes that you're willing to or eager to unleash, is Dean Wade. I think he's a very important member of the Cavs. I venture to say he's one of the more irreplaceable members of the Cavs. We're going to talk about that with Jackson next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season off. I know the season's ongoing. We've got, Thursday night football coming up tonight, but you can start the season off big with a nice return on FanDuel. That is FanDuel, of course, America's #1 sports book. Right now, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. That sounds like a really good deal to me. Maybe that first $5 bet, if you're a believer in the Browns. I was talking earlier this week about how Cleveland was a 1.5-point road favorite. Well, now they're a 1.5-point road underdog. Don't feel too great about that if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, or maybe you think there's a lot of reason for optimism. It can't get worse than a loss to the Giants, you say. Well, maybe it can't, and maybe the Browns on the money line at plus 102 is great value for you. You're getting a little bit more money back taking a money line underdog. FanDuel, the place to go for that and for all of your NFL action. Like I said earlier, you can get started. If you're new to FanDuel, your first $5 bets get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's a great deal. Sounds awesome to me. Sounds like a great way to spend a Sunday. And, when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, live betting, a great option on FanDuel. Plus, FanDuel right now, really not right now, FanDuel always has live stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as you place your bets. So you're going to be not only having fun on FanDuel, you're going to be informed on FanDuel. So one more time, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NBA. The season is here. We've got training camps underway. The Boston Celtics held a practice today. Basketball is back. The Cavs will have an availability tomorrow, and everything NBA is covered on Locked On NBA. You can check that out anywhere you get your podcasts. Also available on YouTube, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. So I've talked not a ton this summer, Jackson, about Dean Wade, but I do think that he is somebody that is a very important player to the Cavs. And I think he's a really important player to the Cavs because the Cavs roster just doesn't have a lot of players like him, right? Like they've got two players that at least are somewhat similar in Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. They've got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. I think you kind of maybe even throw Karis LeVert into that grouping. They've got Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, who I think you can kind of pair together similarly, just group together. But Dean Wade is sort of in his group on his own. And that's why I think the injuries are brought up so frequently with him, because when he's out, the Cavs actually do feel that absence.
Yeah, he is really important. And one of the things that I think gets lost in a lot of the Dean Wade discussion is we talk about, when you bring up Dean Wade, you think of, okay, well, with Dean Wade out there, you're going to have more spacing. The offense is going to flow a little better. Historically, the offense has been worse when he is on the floor. every single season, the offense has been worse when he's playing as opposed to when he's not playing. The spacing that he provides is not really like he's a 39% 3-point shooter, but he doesn't shoot threes. That's a problem, so that's one of the things that I think is wrong when we bring up Dean Wade. One of the things that we don't talk enough about is that Dean Wade might be like sneakily one of the best defenders in the NBA. I think he is the second best defender on the Cavaliers, and I think Jarrett Allen's phenomenal. I think Isaac Okoro's phenomenal. This isn't a shot at them. I think we are undervaluing just how good Dean Wade is. There are very few people in the league who have he's great at screen navigating. He's great. He has more strength than people realize. We saw him, I keep going back to this Memphis game where he closed the game guarding Jaren Jackson Jr. because both of the Cavs centers were out. He held his ground in that situation. He can go out and guard Jason Tatum. He can go out and guard Jaylen Brown. There's not many players in the league who you can say that about. And I think one of the things that people say is that, like, this guy's a smart defender. Usually when they say somebody's like a smart defender, they're talking about somebody like Sam Merrill who does not have the physical abilities to be a good defender, but they're always in the right place.
Right.
Dean Wade is legitimately probably the smartest defender on the Cavs. He's always in the right spot, and you combine that with the physical abilities that he has. The reason why we don't talk about him like that is because it's a lot easier to see where, like, Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen are impactful because they get a lot more blocks and things like that. But I think Dean Wade is criminally underrated on defense. And you were bringing up about Kenny Atkinson extending Jarrett Allen's range. What I want to see with Kenny Atkinson is, can he really give Dean Wade whatever he needs, like whatever it's confidence or putting him in the right position where he's actually taking more than 3 threes a game, where he's not consistently one of the lowest usage offensive players on the court, because he does have the ability to be an impactful offensive player. It just has not translated yet, except for in these very small spurts. But the defense is there. The Cavs were 8.6 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor playing defense than they were without him. That is ridiculous.
The defense is awesome. And I think that the shooting value needs to go up. Like, I think you're 100% right about that. Because you even look at his per 36 numbers. Like, he at, 39% shooting is attempting under 7 threes per 36 minutes. He needs to be somebody. No, he needs to be around 10 threes per 36 minutes. And then that's when I think health is a big issue with him. As we know, he's missed significant time the last 2 years. He needs to be somebody that is shooting 10 threes per 36 minutes. And that is when, Jackson, I think you start to feel his value on both ends, because he's able to be out there a little bit more if he is somebody that is adding to your offense because he's not a super low usage guy anymore. Then I think he plays more too, because he's more valuable on both ends.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. The last 3 years, he was in the 3rd percentile for usage, the 2nd percentile for usage, and then back to the 3rd percentile for usage. That can't happen. That's not even just a 3-point, that's not even just a 3-point volume thing. It's he's not being a connector. He's not really participating in the offense. He's just more like a bystander. And him being able to have such an effect on the game while being literally invisible on offense, I think almost that just shows how impressive his defense is. And I think he has the skills to be that offensive player, but he needs to actually be on the court. He hasn't played 60 games once in his career. That is a problem. So if you get health, if you get a empowered Dean Wade on the offensive end, that is even an Isaac Okoro level usage player, you're talking about somebody who I think you could feel comfortable slotting into a starting role if you did think that the Jarrett Allen thing wasn't going to work out.
Yeah, I do think that even if, the Jarrett Allen thing does work out, I think there are interesting lineups with Evan at the 5, Dean Wade at the 4. You can kind of take your pick at the 2 and 3, and then have Darius Garland running the show. I think that those do present some interesting lineups, some interesting options for the Cavs. But offensively, it needs to come along for him. He needs to up his volume, I think, for the Cavs to be able to trust that.
Yeah, and he's somebody who can even play the 3 too.
Right.
I think that all goes back to the offense because he can guard threes. It's just can he offensively facilitate as a 3, and that's where it's like no, because can't really facilitate as a 4, and that's a lot easier for somebody who is as good of a spot up shooter as him.
Yes, definitely. Well, Jackson, thank you very much for doing this. Where can everyone find your work, and what do you got coming on?
You can find my work at fearthesword.com. I have an article out today about Dean Wade, which might surprise you with what I just said about him. Yeah, so go to fearthesword.com, check that out. We're doing lots of season preview content, so after you get done listening to Locked On Cavs every day, check us out.
Yeah, there he is. Jackson, thanks so much for doing this. Very much appreciate the time. Like I said earlier, thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Might actually have 2 episodes coming tomorrow. Kenny Atkinson, Kobe Altman are scheduled to speak at 10 a.m. Ideally, I'd like to have an episode after that. We will just kind of have to wait and see, but they are scheduled to have their media day tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then the real thing, media day is set for Monday. Training camp starts Tuesday at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Weather cooperation with the hurricane down in Florida, but I'm hoping that hurricane cooperates, gets out of the way, and I will be in Florida for training camp next week. So thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.